Imagine waking up tomorrow to find out that two narrow strips of water on opposite sides of the planet just choked, and with them, 20 to 30% of global trade froze in place. Because that's the quiet, uncomfortable truth behind the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal. They are not just shortcuts, they are single points of failure, and both are starting to crack. For more than a century, these two man-made cuts in the earth have held the global economy together with duct tape and optimism. One slices through the Egyptian desert, linking Europe to Asia. The other carves across the jungles of Central America, linking the Atlantic to the Pacific. Together, they've saved ships billions of kilometers in sailing distance and shaved weeks off delivery times for everything from oil and grain to electronics and insulin. But now, the question isn't which canal is more impressive. It's which one fails first, and what happens when both start failing at the same time. Let's start with the basic matchup, because this is not a fair fight. The Suez Canal is roughly 193 kilometers long, running at sea level from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea with no locks. Just a narrow, watery trench across sand and rock. The Panama Canal is much shorter, around 80 kilometers, but it compensates with engineering. A staircase of locks lifts ships up to an artificial lake and then lowers them back to the ocean. Suez is like a straight highway, simple but crowded and exposed. Panama is like a mountain pass with elevators, complex, controlled, and utterly dependent on one resource: fresh water. Here's the twist. Both canals were built for a world that no longer exists. When Suez opened in 1869, nobody imagined 400-meter container ships stacked with thousands of steel boxes, each carrying a piece of just-in-time global supply chains. When Panama opened in 1914, the idea that climate change and shifting rainfall could threaten the canal's water supply was science fiction. Yet today, Suez is overwhelmed by size and geopolitics, while Panama is being strangled by the sky itself. And it's not just about ships and water, it's about timing. Modern supply chains run on tight schedules where a delay of a few days can throw off production lines, retail launches, and even seasonal sales. A fashion brand waiting on a shipment of clothes, a car factory waiting on components, or a supermarket chain waiting on food imports. All of them quietly depend on these two canals working perfectly. When they don't, companies pay more for alternative routes, and those costs don't disappear. They creep into price tags that ordinary people see. Suez's biggest warning shot came in March 2021, when a single container ship, the Ever Given, managed to wedge itself diagonally across the canal and block one of the busiest maritime arteries on Earth for 6 days. The ship was roughly 400 meters long and weighed around 220,000 tons. And for almost a week, it sat there like a cork in a global bottle. Billions of dollars in trade were delayed. Dozens of ships piled up at both ends, and some vessels were forced to sail all the way around Africa to keep moving. That incident wasn't just a meme. It was a preview of what happens when a fragile choke point meets modern ship sizes and unforgiving geography. But traffic jams and accidents are only half of Suez's problem. Since late 2023, the region around the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb has turned into a geopolitical minefield. Yemen's Houthi movement began targeting commercial shipping with drones and missiles, attacking vessels passing along the route that feeds into Suez. From there on, attacks and attempted attacks forced ship owners to reroute, delay voyages, or avoid the area altogether. The result? A sharp decline in traffic through the canal and a serious hit to Egypt's revenue, which depends heavily on canal tolls. Suez isn't just a piece of infrastructure, it's a hostage to politics, conflict, and regional power struggles. Now shift to Panama, and the story feels very different, but equally dangerous. The Panama Canal doesn't face missiles, it faces evaporation. The entire lock system depends on Gatun Lake, an artificial freshwater reservoir that supplies the water needed to lift and lower ships. Every time a ship transits, millions of liters of freshwater are released out to sea and lost. In normal years, heavy tropical rains keep the lake full, and the canal can handle more than 35 to 50 ship transits per day. But recent years haven't been normal. From late 2022 into 2024, the region was hit by severe drought, driven by a combination of climate change and El Niño. Gatun Lake's water level dropped so much that the Canal Authority had no choice. They slashed the number of daily transits and imposed draft restrictions, limiting how deep a ship could sit in the water if it wanted to pass. At one point, capacity was cut by around a third. For thousands of vessels, this meant longer waiting times, queues forming at nearby anchorages, and alternative routes suddenly looking more attractive despite higher costs. And here's where things get even more uncomfortable. The fixes aren't easy. You can't simply dig another Suez or another Panama somewhere else on the map without decades of work, billions of dollars, and massive environmental damage. Proposals pop up, like land bridges with rail connections, expanded pipelines, or even futuristic ideas like Arctic passages as ice retreats. But none of them can fully replace what these two canals currently provide. They can only nibble around the edges. So the world is stuck trying to harden two existing choke points, rather than replace them altogether. Think about the pattern here. Suez is being hit from above. Politics, war, and security threats that can flare up almost overnight. Panama is being hit from below. Environmental changes, water scarcity, and long-term climate shifts that quietly erode reliability year after year. One choke point is vulnerable to human decisions, the other to atmospheric physics. Both vulnerabilities translate into the same outcome: unpredictability, higher shipping costs, and knock-on effects for prices worldwide. To really see why these canals matter, follow the cargo, a huge slice of Europe-Asia trade, containers full of manufactured goods, oil and gas shipments from the Gulf, grain, chemicals, relies on Suez. When ships are diverted around the Cape of Good Hope, voyages can stretch by 10 to 14 days, fuel consumption surges, and freight rates climb. For Panama, the mix is different. It's a vital route for trade between Asia and the east coast of the Americas, plus bulk goods like grains, coal, and energy products. When drought forces capacity cuts, fewer ships can pass, some must carry lighter loads, and some operators reroute via Suez or around South America, adding time and cost. Here's where the battle of failing choke points really kicks in. You don't feel the pain of one canal in isolation. When Suez becomes risky because of attacks or blockages, some ships say, "Forget it, let's go via Panama." But if Panama is simultaneously constrained by drought and transit limits, that backup option is weaker and more expensive. The reverse is also true. When Panama is clogged or restricted, shippers lean more on Suez. Exactly when Suez is facing security threats or congestion. The two canals are like two overloaded escape routes out of a burning building. If one narrows, everyone floods into the other, and neither can handle the stress. Now, structurally, Suez and Panama are fragile in very different ways. Suez is at sea level and has no locks, which means ships don't need to be lifted and lowered, and transit can be smoother, at least in theory. But that simplicity has a dark side. A single grounding, a single oversized vessel drifting sideways can block the entire channel from bank to bank. The canal runs through a narrow corridor with limited room for maneuvering, and traffic density is high. The Ever Given incident showed that as ship sizes grow faster than canal expansion and dredging, the margin for error keeps shrinking. Panama, on the other hand, is a technical masterpiece that now looks like it was designed for a climate that's disappearing. Its locks are feats of engineering that allow the canal to hop over a continental divide using a man-made lake, but every lock cycle literally flushes fresh water out to sea. In an era of more frequent droughts, that model becomes risky. Recent constraints have shown that even with careful water management and updated lock designs, there's a hard upper limit imposed by rainfall and hydrology. Less rain means fewer, smaller ships, no matter how badly the world wants the opposite. So which canal is losing this battle? It depends on what you count. In terms of immediate geopolitical risk, Suez looks more fragile. Attacks, wars, and regional tensions can shut down traffic literally overnight, with no warning and no easy technical fix. You can add more patrols, escorts, and defenses, but you can't eliminate the political root causes of conflict in that region. In terms of long-term structural risk, Panama is on thinner ice because it is chained to a specific climate pattern and water cycle that climate change is actively destabilizing. You can build more reservoirs and tweak operations, but you cannot negotiate with rainfall. And then there's the economic side. Egypt depends heavily on canal tolls as a source of foreign currency, and recent drops in traffic due to security risks and diversions have hammered that revenue, pressuring the country's already strained finances. Panama also relies on canal income, but its situation is tied more directly to the investments required to adapt. New water management projects, potential expansions, and long-term infrastructure upgrades to withstand droughts. Both countries need cash to keep their canals competitive, But disruptions and restrictions make that cash harder to earn, creating a vicious circle. So, what is the world doing about this? In the security realm, there are international naval patrols and coalitions trying to protect shipping in and around the Red Sea routes feeding into Suez. Shipping companies adjust routes in real time, sometimes choosing longer but safer passages around Africa when insurance and security risks spike. On the climate side, Panama is experimenting with transit limits, draft controls, and potential long-term water projects to stabilize Gatun Lake levels despite changing rainfall. But none of these are silver bullets. They are defensive moves in a game where the rules, political and environmental, are shifting faster than the concrete can be poured. Meanwhile, ship owners, logistics companies, and even governments are being forced to rethink basic assumptions. For decades, the default plan was simple. Assume Suez and Panama are always open, always available, and always cheaper than going around continents. Now, routing models have to factor in live security updates, drought forecasts, and the possibility that either choke point could become unreliable for weeks or months at a time. Some cargoes shift to rail where possible. Some move to different ports. And some industries consider regionalizing supply chains to reduce dependence on these narrow passages. There's also a hidden winner in this story: the long, expensive routes that everyone tried to forget. When Suez is risky, going around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa suddenly becomes viable again, even if it adds thousands of kilometers and significant fuel costs. When Panama is constrained, ships may sail around South America instead of cutting through Central America. These routes are like backup generators, inefficient, costly, and polluting, but invaluable when the main power lines fail. So here's the uncomfortable big picture. The world has wired a shocking amount of its trade through two very narrow, very fragile corridors, and both are now under pressure from forces that cannot be fully controlled. Suez is squeezed by geopolitical instability and the sheer scale of modern ships. Panama is squeezed by climate volatility and the physics of freshwater supply. Each canal's trouble amplifies the other's importance, turning their problems into a feedback loop that makes the entire global trading system more brittle. If you zoom in on the next decade, the battle between Suez and Panama isn't about which one dominates global trade, it's about which one adapts faster and fails less catastrophically. Can Suez maintain security and invest in capacity while navigating regional conflicts and economic crises in Egypt? Can Panama secure enough water and infrastructure upgrades to keep ships moving even as rainfall patterns become less predictable? Neither challenge is cheap, and both require international coordination, not just national decisions. The irony is that the more efficient global trade becomes, the more it needs these choke points, and the more damage it suffers when they stumble. Lean inventories, just-in-time logistics, and globalized manufacturing all assume that the planet's maritime arteries stay open and reliable. A single 6-day blockage or a few months of drought-induced transit cuts can ripple through supply chains, showing up as higher prices, late deliveries, or shortages thousands of kilometers away. In other words, the battle of the world's failing choke points is not happening only on a map. It's happening in shipping rates, factory schedules, and eventually in your cost of living. So the next time you look at a world map and see those two skinny lines, the Suez Canal in Egypt and the Panama Canal in Central America, don't think of them as mere shortcuts for ships. Think of them as pressure points on the global economy's nervous system, where a small disruption can cause a worldwide twitch. Suez, under the shadow of conflict and megaships. Panama, under the shadow of shrinking lakes and shifting skies. Two canals, two different kinds of failure, but one shared risk, that we've asked too much of them for too long, without building a plan B. If you want more deep dives into the hidden choke points, fragile systems, and overlooked fault lines that quietly hold the modern world together, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who still thinks those thin blue lines on the map are just harmless shortcuts. Comment below which invisible vulnerability you want us to uncover next, and I'll see you in the next one.